Okay, so in this next video, we're really just going to focus on one topic of what's going on with the blood in the vessels, and that's blood pressure. Now, blood pressure we could easily define as the force that blood exerts on vessel walls. Now, if you think about this and think of, okay, so why is this important? Well, let's look at vessels. Let's think of how vessels are made, and they're tissues. But they are somewhat delicate for the most part. And so we can get a sense that, yeah, if you build up a lot of pressure on these vessels, that's probably not a good thing. And it's not a good thing. Over time, as we age, we can potentially damage these vessels, whether that's through diet and maybe building up plaques on the walls of these, whether that's simply through age and alterations in some of the lining of these vessels. And so when we increase blood pressure, that can potentially damage vessels and cause problems with the lining, even to some extent some of the smooth muscle. And so understanding blood pressure and what controls it and how do we measure it and how do we know what that is key. So blood pressure is determined by a couple of things. One is what we call cardiac output. And cardiac output is simply going to be the amount of blood your heart is pushing out per minute. And this is simply a product of heart rate times stroke volume. Heart rate being how much your heart beats, stroke volume being how much per beat in liters or milliliters is the volume of that blood. So that's one part of it, but it's not the only part because the vessels play a role as well. As we looked at last video, vessels can dilate and constrict, vasoconstriction and vasodilation. And so not surprisingly, if vessels are dilated, there is more room for blood to flow. If there's more room, there's less pressure, and that will drop blood pressure. The reverse of that being if there is vasoconstriction, if vessels are constricted or they're partially blocked, that in theory will cause less room for blood to flow, less room, pressure increases, we'll see an increase in blood pressure. Again, nothing terribly unique here. And so when we measure blood pressure, which I'm sure all of you have had done before, we often measure it in two numbers, systolic and diastolic. And so you see here on the graph here, normal resting blood pressure for all of you is what we call 120 over 80. And that's simply 120 millimeters of mercury systolic blood pressure and 80 millimeters of mercury diastolic. Well, you know what systolic and diastolic mean, so I'm not going to go over that. So what we're seeing here is that there is blood pressure during systole, contraction, and there's blood pressure during diastole, relaxation. And both of those are important. Now, the question becomes, all right, so that's great. And as we'll see here, this graph is depicting that as we move on from the larger arteries to the smaller arteries to the capillaries, we start to lose this distinction. And the reason being, by the time we get here, maybe a good way to think about this, if you do CrossFit, okay, so CrossFit, one of the big exercises now is you take this really long, heavy rope and you kind of just go like that really hard. Well, at the point of your hands, there's a lot of movement in this rope, depending on the force you're applying it to it. But by the time the rope moves all the way down 10, 20, 30 feet away from you, that rope's not moving. Now, maybe you're stronger than I, but because it's so heavy and you need to produce so much force, that starts to die out over time. Well, that's what we'll see here as far as systolic and diastolic pressure. So how do we measure this? Well, this is one of the unique things, and in fact, it's such a very simple scientific way to do this. You've probably been to a doctor's office before, a nurse or someone, and they measured your blood pressure. And so what they did, and this is kind of my crude drawing here. So this is your arm. Imagine this is your big bicep. Mine's not big, so mine's kind of narrow here. And here we have a blood pressure cuff, which we have wrapped around this arm. This blood pressure cuff is attached to a valve, and this valve we can actually squeeze to increase the amount of air in this cuff. That'll actually constrict this cuff, or really constrict the bladder of it and make it tighter. Okay, so let's say we can measure pressure, and typically these also have a pressure gauge attached to them right there. Oops, let's make that gray color so we don't get lost here. So typically, get my gray. Typically, there's a little gauge here. It's a nice circle. It's got some numbers, you know, and it kind of tells you, hey, what's the blood pressure? So the way we do this and the way this works is really unique. And let me draw a blood vessel here just to kind of get us situated. You know, because again, we have blood going through. Oopsies. We have blood. Come back. We have blood. That works. Going through here. Okay. Now, if we were to constrict this valve here, and actually, let's start with loosening. If we were to put no pressure in this valve, blood can easily flow through this this arm here. But let's say we start to constrict this, okay? And so let's just say, let's pick another number here. Let's just say we increase the pressure here to say 20 millimeters of mercury, okay? Well, that's only 20 millimeters of mercury. It's not much. And so blood's still going to flow through here pretty easily. So let's go through how we actually do blood pressure. So the actual technique in blood pressure is what we do. We take this valve and we pump it up really tight, like to, I'm just going to throw out a number, 160 millimeters of mercury. So there is 160 millimeters of pressure in this valve, okay? Well, let's just say your average systolic pressure is 120. So the average pressure here in that let's say it's called a brachial artery, is 120. Well, 160 is greater than 120. And so because of that, blood cannot flow through here. Well, why is this important? Well, if I were to take a stethoscope and put it right there to try to hear something, and if I attach this stethoscope to my head, imagine there's my head right here, put it in both ears, I would hear nothing. Because again, there's no blood flowing through here. Okay, so let's change this up a little bit. Let's imagine that instead of this being 160, I drop it down to 140. Okay, 140 here, 120 here. I'm still not going to hear anything because again, the pressure is greater here than it is, the pressure on the cuff is greater than the arm. Let's say I drop it down to 119. How's that? Or 119.9. Want to be specific? Well, what happens? Well, now the pressure in this cuff is actually less than the pressure in the brachial artery. And so what's going to happen is blood can start to flow through. And I will hear a sound. Boop, boop. I will hear a heartbeat. The second I hear that sound, the pressure that is our systolic blood pressure. And we usually say that's 120, 119.9, it's 120. And so what I do is I continue to decrease the pressure in this cuff. I drop it down to 110, all right? Nothing different. I still hear boop, boop, boop. Let's drop it down to 100. Nothing different. I still hear boop, boop, boop. Let's drop it down to 90. Same thing. Boop, boop, boop. And then we get to 80. Well, what happens with 80 is now the cuff here has become so loose. So the pressure has dropped. So much so that not only during systole can blood now get through, but when the heart is relaxed, diastole, even during diastole, blood can get through now. And because blood is continually getting through in both systole and diastole at this cuff, I'm going to hear nothing. And that seems weird. You're like, well, wait, does that mean blood's not flowing? No, of course blood is flowing. The difference is that blood is flowing both during systole and diastole. And because of that, I'm not really going to hear the distinguishing features between them. And so that 80, when I stop hearing something, that is what we call our diastolic blood pressure. And in this case, a person would have a blood pressure of 120 over 80. And this is a common way we measure blood pressure. It's been around for, gosh, more than a century. And a really easy way to get a sense of how elastic, how healthy the vessels are in the body. Now, we're not going to actually learn how to do that in class. There's other classes, exercise phys, advanced clinical phys for some of you. I know in exercise prescription, we go over how to take blood pressure. Here, I just want you to know the physiology of it and how do we measure pressure, why is it important, and what's the difference between systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Okay, that finishes our part here on blood pressure.